Hey everybody, welcome back to Paradise on Pennies. So today I want to talk a little bit more about the food portion of our budget. And the food portion of the budget is something that a lot of people were shocked or surprised by, maybe intrigued, and maybe some didn't believe it. So I think that it would be a good thing to talk a little more about, and I promised that I would. And so to keep my promise, I've actually been busy writing out meal lists. And I looked at our common meals that we eat, and I tried to break down the prices on a per meal basis so that I could actually show you guys, that I can prove to you that we can actually live on this little. And if anybody's curious and planning on doing some sort of nomadic life on a budget as well out there, then maybe this will help you in thinking about the types of meals that you might want to incorporate into your meal list, store list, and ways to save money on the food budget, because that's a big part of our budget. So like I said, I went through and first I jotted down a lot of our common meals that we eat, just to take a look at what they are costing us on a per meal basis. Normally we just kind of go to the store and we kind of know our budget, and we do different cost savings techniques to stay within that budget. And that has worked so far. I never before had actually broken it down on a per meal basis. So this has been a really interesting journey for me as well. So just for some ideas, we could go on a lot of different meals here, but here's some of our very common meals and how much that they cost us. So one big meal that we like to have often is salsa, or like a pico dip. We eat a lot of vegetable-based meals, and this one fits really well. And since vegetables are usually pretty easy to, well, they're cheap as they are, and then on top of it, they're easy to get on discount, it's a good cost-saving meal to have. Our salsa prices vary depending on what's on sale and where we're at in the country, but it probably cost us maybe around $1. That's probably at the higher end, actually, but about $1 for both of us to have a salsa meal. And that includes dipping some chips into some cut up vegetables to make a pico salsa dip. And then I looked at some meals with eggs. We eat a lot of eggs around here, and an egg scrambler, something that might include some eggs and some potatoes and maybe some cut up vegetables like onions or peppers, would probably cost under 60 cents. So I calculated around 59 cents. And again, this is for 2 people. So a meal for 2. Egg sandwiches are a pretty cheap option. For the eggs and the bread, it came out to about 36 cents for 2 egg sandwiches. So that's a nice cheap option to have around for a meal, and good for any time of day. A lot of people like their burgers. We don't do a very heavy meat-based diet around here. And we've found that a lot of alternatives help keep the budget down as well. One great thing to incorporate might be eggplant. I've talked a little bit about eggplant around here. And if you use eggplant as a substitute for your meat on, say, a burger concept or a sandwich of any kind, you can save a lot of money on the meat cost. So for us, an eggplant burger with lots of toppings still only costs both of us about $1.40. That beats going to fast food, even if it is the dollar menu. And even if we want to add some potatoes to that and make some fries, it's still only around $1.62. We eat a lot of meals with a rice base as well, and a rice stir fry is another really cheap option. You can incorporate whatever vegetables you want. We do a lot with carrots. Carrots are another really cheap, highly nutritious vegetable to have on hand. We almost always have carrots. And a rice stir fry, say with some carrots, maybe some peppers and onions. You could even throw in an egg if you wanted that as well to bulk it up or add some level of nutrition. And that would still only cost about 54 cents for 2 people. So this is a great, nutritious, cheap meal. Also with rice, we do things like rice and bean mixes. Again, really cheap stuff to have on hand. You can get the beans in can or in dried form. And the dried form would be a cheap option to have bulk beans around, which is something that we do. And that might cost, I calculated it with, I put rice, beans, and I added some onions and peppers and tomato to kind of spruce it up a bit. And that, even with all that, only comes out to about 69 cents, again, for a meal for 2. If we incorporate if we incorporate meat into the meals, it almost inevitably makes the prices higher, so keep that in mind. We do chicken sometimes, and chicken with, say, some potatoes on the side and maybe some vegetables as well. This would be a heartier meal for us, maybe on a cold day, or maybe if we didn't eat much in the way of breakfast or a heavy lunch, we might have a meal like this. Still at that portion and all those things, it only ends up costing about $1.49. A chicken sandwich is about $1.20. That's chicken, some bread, and maybe some onions, cucumbers, stuff like that on the sandwich. Some other great cheap meal options. Here's an idea: carrot soup. It's basically carrots and nuts. There's a lot of other things you can add to it, but in its simplest form, it's carrots and nuts. Still tastes good, and it's a great meal for a hot day. You can eat this. This is a cold soup option, and that came out to maybe about 65 cents for 2 bowls of that. Spaghetti, always a cheap go-to. It's probably about 50 cents still for a decent portion of spaghetti. I have some tips on how to keep that cost low. I don't buy commercial canned sauces. I actually just get cheap cans of tomato paste and add a little water and some spices in it, and that's our tomato sauce. If tomatoes are on a heck of a sale, you could actually just make your own sauce as well. It'll save you a ton, and it also saves you in the weird extra ingredients that they like to put in cans or jars of commercial tomato sauce, spaghetti sauce. On a cold day, chicken noodle soup is good. All kinds of soups are good. Chicken noodle soup has the inclusion of meat. Again, takes the price up just a hair, but still only about $1.59 for that meal for 2. Other soup ideas, something like a veggie soup. Veggie soups can be really cheap, or you can go all out and add a lot. Still going to be cheap because it includes veggies. We often make some sort of like a potato soup, and even if I put in a portion of potatoes, maybe some squash, peppers and celery, onions, and then whatever kind of, I guess, sauce or soup base you want. You can use like dried milk, you can use seasonings, you can use powdered cheese in this, whatever. It'll come out to about 95 cents to make the soup. So soups are a great cheap option, so keep those in mind too. In general, our breakfasts might cost us maybe like a dime up to 50-60 cents at most. We do a lot of cheap breakfast options. For instance, bananas are probably like a quarter. A handful of nuts could be anywhere from like a quarter to 50 cents. Bread is pretty cheap, and we always get bread on discount if we buy it. So a couple of slices of bread might run us like a dime, 20 cents at most. Oatmeal, we could still have a decent portion of oatmeal each, and it'd only be 50 cents. And oatmeal is very filling, so if I eat oatmeal for breakfast, I'm probably not going to want lunch for a while. Egg sandwiches are a super cheap option. They're probably about 36 cents. So eggs and bread keeps it really cheap. Cheap breakfast also makes a cheap lunch or a cheap dinner as well. And we will make egg scramblers when we have eggs as well. Since eggs are so cheap and we have a lot around, we usually eat some meals that it would be like eggs for breakfast and maybe eggs for dinner. So those are the types of breakfasts that we eat and how we keep those costs low. And like I mentioned, depending on what we eat for breakfast or when we eat, sometimes we'll get up in the morning and we'll just go for a hike, and we might grab something small at most, like some fruit or nuts, or we might just eat a late breakfast, kind of more like a brunch type thing. And so some days we might eat a late lunch. The point is we often don't eat 3 meals a day. It's another way to save money as well. You don't necessarily need 3 meals. It just depends on what you eat and when you eat it. A couple of other great cheap ideas, just some toast with, say, some berries on it. And if it's the time of year when you can forage berries, this makes it really cheap because it's just the cost of the toast. So normally that costs us, again, maybe 20 cents. With the toast, you could have toast with berries, and you could add eggs to it, and it won't add that much to your cost. That might be like a 50-cent meal, breakfast, whenever. We don't really stick to the standard breakfast, lunch, dinner stuff. Zucchini with tuna is a really good cheap meal. That, even if you have a lot, and you turn it into a meal rather than a snack, it's still only about $1. Fried squash is pretty good. We do different fried vegetables, and those are probably 30-40 cents. Fried potatoes, also 30-40 cents at most, and it can be a pretty filling meal. We also make applesauce for a snack. That's a pretty cheap snack alternative. It might be like 15 cents for a portion of the applesauce. I'll make a big pot on the cast iron, and then we'll just keep it around and snack on it over the course of a couple days. So like I said, I think it's probably 15 cents for each bowl that you get out of it. So those are just a few, again, of our major like base meals. Again, we eat all kinds of different things depending on what's on sale and, you know, what we can get in different regions. We can get things for different discounts. And so some of these meal prices can actually be and normally are a lot cheaper for us. For instance, when we're in the southern part of the U.S., we end up getting things like bags of grapefruits or oranges that come off people's trees that they bring to like dog parks. And we also do discount produce markets that have, I mean, you get lots of vegetables for a really cheap price. So our cost of our vegetables would be, I don't know, cut in at least a quarter, if not more, than the prices that I reported here. I didn't take that into account in my prices here, so it could be a lot cheaper. There's also just different sales that allow these things to be cheaper than what I posted here. And we also do foraging, and particularly when we get up north, something like, you know, the greens and the berries and mushrooms and whatever we end up getting for free from the bounty from Earth ends up making these prices also lower. So that should give you a pretty good idea of how the types of meals we eat in general and how the costs can be so low for us. Now, taking those types of meals together, what I did was I actually, just to give you guys an example, I wrote out some meal combinations so you can think about how this would work out.